Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
The fall 2024 semester has arrived. Students are back on campus. It is always an exciting time back on a university, and it's time to restart the Where You At podcast. This is a podcast where we highlight the work of San Diego State alums who are making us proud in various different communications industries. My name is Josh Suchon. I attended San Diego State from 1991 through 1996. Yes, I was on the 5-year plan. I worked for the Daily Aztec almost my entire time in college. I was the editor-in-chief my final year, and I also worked for KCR. I'm the host of this podcast, and as we restart this semester's podcast, a few reminders. We record episodes and post them once a week during the fall and spring semesters, and we are always looking for ideas for future guests. This week, we begin with some very important news. Our guest this week is Jesse Marx. He is the new student media manager, and I'm going to formally introduce him in a moment, but we need to let people know, students, alums, everyone else, that there are some changes to the School of Journalism and Media Studies as it pertains to the Daily Aztec and KCR. We're going to get into what it used to be like, the changes that have been made, and why those changes were made. And so without further ado, Jesse Marx, the new student media manager, welcome to San Diego State University and welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Josh. I am not an alum, but I am super happy to be here regardless.
All right, I'm not going to read the entire press release when Jesse was introduced, but I'm going to read 3 paragraphs so that we can get to know him and we can understand his background, and then we'll find out more about him. So I'm going to read from the press release. Jesse Marx is a journalist whose work focuses on police, politics, and labor in a time of rising inequality. He's the former deputy investigative editor at the San Francisco Chronicle and former associate editor at Voice of San Diego, where he managed the internship program, it's very important, and mentored students primarily from SDSU, City College, and Southwestern Community College. His reporting on police technology was cited by the Grassroots Coalition that wrote San Diego's surveillance ordinance, and his reporting on cops with criminal records led to reforms at the state level. Other stories on COVID-19 related deaths earned his reporting team the First Amendment Coalition's 2021 Free Speech and Open Government Award and SPJ's San Diego 2022 First Amendment Award. His byline has also appeared in Wired, The Nation, In These Times, and San Diego Magazine, and he helped launch the community newspaper All Rise. He is co-author of Redacted, a book about state secrecy and public records, and a graduate of the Columbia Journalism School. When I read that, Jesse, I went, all right, we have somebody very good to take on this important role. What else is pertinent about your background that you're proud of that people should know about you?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that, Josh. That is certainly the top level takeaway from the last few years of my experience, but I have a collective 15 years, nearly 15 years as a journalist. I've been a reporter. I've been an editor. I've worn a variety of different hats. I've worked for-profit as well as nonprofit media. I actually grew up outside of Chicago originally, but I moved around a lot for work. So I started as a general assignment reporter. I cut my teeth just covering school board meetings, city council meetings, and the courthouse as well. So that was pretty fundamental to me and my development looking back at it as eventually an investigative reporter. I mean, I went into the courthouse every single day and just realized very quickly that it was a system of logic and a language that I didn't fully understand. And so I think it dawned on me very, very early in my career that the job of a reporter was to understand and be able to articulate and translate this other world that exists beyond you, this bigger governmental world, its system of logic, its language, its policies, because then you're going to have to relay that to other people so they can make informed choices and they can participate in a democratic society. But I also realized very early that I needed some mentorship myself. When I started off, it was a small newspaper, only a circulation of 10,000 people. So I sought out mentorship very early because I recognized that I needed it. So I ended up going to grad school, and then I moved around a lot. I ended up at the Oregonian for a time. As an intern, I worked for an alt weekly in Minneapolis, RIP, City Pages. I was at the Desert Sun and also contributed to Gannett. So, in addition to all that, I've been freelancing as well and just helping out where I can. So, when a community group approached me last summer to help them launch a community newspaper, I thought that that would be a wonderful transition for me away from doing more reporting and editing myself and actually teach other people and help other people so that we could grow the media around San Diego.
Okay, so let's get into the changes that are happening to the Daily Aztec and the KCR. And we should state that was not Jesse's plan. He was not previously employed by the university. So these were not your decisions to be made. But in terms of what you learned about why, tell us the changes that are being made and why.
So, Josh, everyone I've spoken to in the last few weeks, they're in agreement that the Daily Aztec was working pretty well until COVID hit. As a space for both JMS students and non-JMS students to cut their teeth. Certainly an important training ground for the wider media of San Diego County at large. A lot of the DA people, KCR people would end up at KPBS, Union Tribune, CBS, Voice of San Diego. But when COVID hit, the staff had to isolate from one another for a long time. And we all know that, working through a screen every single day is not the best way to build bonds. So I think that was certainly a blow to student media at SDSU. And then in the process, a lot of the institutional knowledge that had been built up and traditionally been handed down from one editor to another, that went out the window. So essentially every single year, the staffs at both media outlets were starting from scratch. And so the way that my job had been framed to me by Temple and other people was, you're the through line. Meaning my job first and foremost is to mentor the young reporters, photographers, producers, hosts, etc. I'm not walking in the door as an expert on each and every one of those roles. For instance, I've filled in as a photographer in a pinch, but I've never really been employed in that position, so that's not my specialty. So whatever I can't provide direct counseling on, I know other people who can, and it's my responsibility to invite them in. So what I bring to the table is experience and editorial judgment. We also know that KCR, or maybe your listeners don't know, KCR and Daily Aztec were previously a part of Associated Students, but now they're a part of SDSU proper, I guess you could say. So the other reason for my role is structural. Kurt, who's been the student media coordinator for the last few years, he's taking the lead and handling more of the administrative side of that transition from one part of the campus to another. And I am eternally grateful to Kurt. So shout out to you. But on a year-to-year basis going forward, I think it's going to depend on who walks in the door, who we recruit, and we have to be fine with that, and we have to be flexible and work what we have in the meantime. But longer term, I specifically need to think about how to grow both organizations, how to cover the campus effectively, how to incentivize people to participate, and how to partner with other media outlets, and then eventually, hopefully, help fold KCR and the Daily Aztec into the curriculum at large. I should say most of my familiarity with SDSU student media had been with the Daily Aztec. And so I'm getting to know KCR pretty much for the first time. And it's super interesting to me because they've always done their own thing and I respect that. And it's been a home to San Diego State University's counterculture, which is very cool. And I want to turn that up. I don't want to turn that down. I respect that. I want more of that. And I think honestly, just the nation at large, not just San Diego County by itself, is badly lacking in more forms of alternative media. So I'm particularly excited about that. And I think in the end, based on the feedback I got walking in the door, I basically see myself as a advisor as well as a facilitator. So I'm kind of like the liaison between JMS and the students who are on the ground.
So I think about my time at the Daily Aztec, especially when I was editor-in-chief, and it was both awesome and also terrifying knowing that basically whatever decision I made, that was going in the newspaper, that there was nobody else who was looking over my shoulder or looking over our collective shoulders. And we took great pride in the fact that we were independent, that nobody was telling us what to do. And yeah, we made some dumb mistakes and we made some silly mistakes, but we were very proudly independent. And so for those of us who maybe understand this change, but still feel like student journalism should have that independence away from the university, what can you tell us about just your role and how things will change for both the Daily Aztec and KCR?
Yeah. So I both KCR and the Daily Aztec were proudly independent, and I totally get that, and I totally respect that. But What's different now is that the funding model, which had sustained, particularly the Daily Aztec, that's crumbling. And I think we all need to be honest about it. Just the advertising-based model by itself has made it extremely difficult to function. And just look around at the wider media landscape. I mean, I think all institutions need to adapt, and they need to rethink how they're being financed. And so that's going to be one of my responsibilities longer term, is to thread that needle. How do I maintain the independence of this structure editorially, let them learn, let them grow, let it be a space of some structure, but at the same time, they take ownership in it and there's buy-in. And so I think the way to do that is to just have a constant two-way conversation with the students. I want them to feel ownership over this thing. I don't want them to feel like I'm forcing anything upon them. I do need to think structurally of how to tweak this so that it's financially viable and sustainable, but it also exists for them. It's training ground. It's a place where you can experiment, you can make mistakes, and you can learn. And I don't want to take that away from anyone. I want them to walk away with clips. I want them to walk away with skills. And I want them to walk away with confidence, because the wider media market is going to require new ways of thinking and like I said, experimentation. So I spent the first couple of weeks just chatting with the editorial leadership at both KCR and the Daily Aztec about what they need specifically to produce at a high level. So like KCR, for instance, is interested in maybe doing a little bit more storytelling. So I am going to help coordinate a few workshops. We'll do things like script writing, best practices for audio equipment, stuff like that. Over at the Daily Aztec, we're probably going to end up doing weekly training sessions based on what I think is necessary, but also what they're telling me they think that they're interested in and is necessary for them. So we'll do sessions on how to create a beat for yourself from scratch, how to file a public records request, how to clean and comb through data, how to turn stories into social content, how to pitch as a freelancer, just whatever they need to thrive in that environment long term.
Let's get into some of the practical side here. And I know it's at the very beginning of the semester, and so things are, and you're very new at your job, but in terms of what the Daily Aztec and KCR, what they're doing now, let's start with the Daily Aztec. How often do you plan on publishing actual papers, and what goes on the internet? And for KCR, how much of it is news? How much of it is just, we're going to play some music?
Yeah. So I'm actually still getting up to speed with things like, their equipment and their budgets more generally. But it sounds like the DA at this point is basically breaking even financially. And so that means that they have had to make some sacrifices with how often they publish, and more importantly, with who they pay. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but it's my understanding that everybody used to be paid back in the day, right?
Yep. I was paid enough that I did not need a second job. The only people who did not get paid, now you didn't get paid a lot. The editor-in-chief and some of the others definitely got paid. The opinion writers did not get paid, and the advertising staff, they got commission, and a lot of them did really, really well on commission.
Yeah, and so my present challenge at the moment is, because of that, it's difficult to entice students to come outside of the classroom to participate, which, it's obviously going to limit how often we print. I mean, it's called the Daily Aztec, so I assume it used to publish daily. It's a monthly now, and that should tell you something right off the bat. And so I think we need to have an honest conversation about what it looks like over the long term, especially in the digital era, and the fact that the ad revenue is not necessarily going to translate dollar for dollar online. So I don't have an immediate answer for how to steady the ship, but I certainly have a few ideas, having worked in the nonprofit sector, having seen some other experimentations with more reader-supported models, more donor-supported models. So that's my long-term challenge is how to figure out how to get them publishing more frequently. And I can say with confidence, at least ambitiously, that my goal would be for them to get back to publishing something every single day. They try to, but they're not there just yet. So it's one step at a time. I need to start working on the culture. I need to give them what they need skill-wise in order to thrive. And then I need to figure out how to incentivize more people to walk in the door. So it's not easy.
Speaking of those doors, when I was there, the Daily Aztec was in the PSFA building, and then shortly thereafter, it moved to the Business Administration building at the bottom. I remember at one point, KCR was literally in a bathroom that had been gutted and then somewhat retrofitted. It was really, really tiny. Where are they now, and where is the goal for them to move if they are under the JMS umbrella?
Yeah. So Daily Aztec at the moment is in Lambton Hall. There's also a studio for KCR there as well, and then there's the separate radio station across campus. But I kind of like the ragtag feel of where they are. They're in the basement, and you got to take an elevator down just to get there. And if you take the wrong elevator, you've actually gone to the wrong basement. So at Temple, I think on my second day, Temple said, "All right, this like basically gave me a map of here's where you need to go," which would be quite telling of where they are. So I don't think we have any plans to move them immediately, but I do think we need to rethink the layout of that newsroom. I don't know how recently you've been in there, but it's got a kind of dingy vibe to it that I honestly kind of like. But it's a lot of cubicles, and so I would just like that room and that space to breathe a little bit. I would like to allow the reporters and the editors to see one another, at least in the middle of that space, and so they can work side by side. Because I genuinely view this as a team operation, even if there are certain personalities who will inevitably stand out. To me, journalism is not a science; it's an art form, and so it's a fundamentally social endeavor. And that's how I'm thinking about the physical location.
Again, I'm going to consistently reference my time, even though it was a really long time ago in the 90s. But back then, it was very much you either wrote for the Daily Aztec or you talked on the air for KCR, and those two did not cross over. It was very much you guys are doing your thing and we're doing our thing. We're on separate sides of the campus, and that was pretty much it. But now, in this media landscape where we have podcasting and journalists are expected to be able to need to do multimedia things, I'm curious how much crossover you would like to see, where there might exist possibilities for KCR and the Daily Aztec to work together.
Oh, totally. Yeah. They do a little bit of crossover at the moment. But yeah, to your point, it's been like, hey, can the Daily Aztec carve out a little bit of time for something? Right. And so the way that I envision this longer term is that both KCR staff and Daily Aztec staff will be invited to any training sessions and workshops that the other ones are holding. I don't want I want to respect their independence. I want to acknowledge that they do different things and they do different things well. But at the same time, if we're going to learn storytelling, investigative reporting, all of the above, we should try to standardize that as much as possible. I have a few friends who work at KPBS, some of whom initially started off as newspaper reporters. And so I think just learning the fundamentals and the basics of reporting and editing translate into both roles. And I think storytelling in general is just hugely important, and then tailoring it to the actual medium that you're going to be participating in. That's just how I'm thinking about it. And one way to get there, at least for the Daily Aztec, I think is to create a class. And I think that the really good student newspapers locally, like City Times at City College, The Sun at Southwestern, they're classes. And so it creates a structure. You may have weekly assignments, you might not, but it's part lecture, and then it's also part students getting together to figure out what they actually need. And in that process, leadership forms organically over time, and they can make the decisions on what should be in multimedia form, what should be in print. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking.
Let's get to a call to action for alums. You mentioned that you know a lot of different people and some of these different workshops and things like that. What are things that alums should know, people like me who care deeply about San Diego State, the ongoing success of both the Daily Aztec and KCR? What do alums need to know? Let's do the call to action here.
Yeah, I would just say tune in, pick up the paper, read it. I know the Daily Aztec has a newsletter, so please sign up for that. We're going to try to put some more emphasis into that, try to think more creatively how to make that as interesting as possible over the long term. And so I would just say to the alums, track the progress for yourself, and you decide if we're doing a good job or not. Maybe you buy an ad. Maybe at some point we start opening it up to more donations. Maybe we tweak the financial model. I can't totally say for sure, but if you're interested in what I've laid out, if you're interested in helping student media, then just get involved. Give me a call, reach out to me. I have very ambitious plans over the long term. It's going to take some time to get there. But honestly, Josh, I would love to see KCR and the Daily Aztec coexist on the wider level across San Diego County media. I know that that's a pretty ambitious thing to say out loud, but there's certainly partnership opportunities. We've been talking to KPBS about potentially working with them a little bit more going over the long term. So like, for instance, the mayoral debate in a couple of weeks, we may attend that and participate in that. So if you want to see more stuff like that, then you gotta you got to reach out, you got to talk to me. And I don't have all the ideas just yet. I'm still thinking through it and getting settled in. But if you're serious about student media and helping that and helping media in general grow in San Diego County, then please understand that I think we're in an urgent place and an urgent moment in time at the moment. And so I just need your participation and your help.
This is already the fourth semester now of this podcast. And so we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 former guests. And I know that even before I do the interview with them, but especially after, it reminds them of how much pride they have in having attended San Diego State. And I know a lot of them say, hey, how can I do more? How can I get more involved? And so we will get those roughly 36 people plus much more, because I know that some of the things that I look back on from my time was Buster Olney from the San Diego Union Tribune came over and talked to our sports department. And oh my goodness, what a difference that made. And then Buster went on to work for the Baltimore Sun and the New York Times, then ESPN. And to this day, I still know Buster, and it's because he came to my class. He came to the Daily Aztec sports section, and he spoke to all of us. And so I think that having those types of individuals, whether they are able to do it by Zoom because they don't live in San Diego or to do it in person, I think those things were huge for me. And I hope that we can continue to convince more alums that say, hey, I care. I want to do this. I've gained this knowledge, and I want to pass it along.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That's a great point. If you have a particular skill set, if you work in a newsroom already and you want to donate a little bit of your time to just talk to them, that's hugely important. It is important for the students to hear from people in the industry because it's changing rapidly and quickly. And so everybody's trying to figure this out together. But you obviously have built up institutional knowledge and experience that you can impart on other people. And one of the reasons that I wanted to mentor younger journalists was because I realized talking to other journalists about my experience helped me internalize it and articulate it. And so I learned a lot about reporting and editing just by talking out loud with younger reporters. And so I think that that's a mutually reinforcing relationship.
Another question I had, just out of my own curiosity, is just the numbers that we're talking about in terms of how many students are involved in these organizations. And again, I get you just started. It's the very beginning of the semester. But I think back to the Daily Aztec in the 90s, and we had close to 100 people who were working between the production side, the editorial side, the once every 2 week columnists, photographers, everybody. We had close to 100. And I want to say that over at KCR, it was probably in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 different people who had some type of show. Put it this way, you could not just walk in the door and be given an assignment. You could not be given a beat. You kind of had to do a couple of things here and there and then wait your turn. What are the numbers like so far?
So over at the Daily Aztec, there's the editorial leadership board, which is around 12, 15 people around there. But they have a total of 200 people who are involved in it, which is pretty impressive. But the problem, Josh, is that a lot of folks will sign up, they'll maybe write something and then disappear. It's sporadic, it's occasional, and getting those 200 people who've already expressed interest in the Daily Aztec on board longer term is the challenge. And one of the things that I have pitched the Daily Aztec on, and I pitched JMS on, is thinking about Daily Aztecs, especially the news side of the operation, as a entity that covers the campus as though the campus were a city within a city. So I am trying to convince the reporters and the editors to think about their role within the wider framework and the structure of San Diego. What happens in Sacramento affects the campus life. What happens in Washington, D.C., what happens in Mexico. I don't necessarily know how we'll cover those things, but I think one way to get people more interested in writing over the longer term is to convince them that you're actually a part of a larger fabric and that the campus of SDSU has its own governance structure and we should treat it as such.
Another thing I'm curious about, so now that Daily Aztec and KCR are under JMS, are they getting class credit? Is this something where they get class credit, or how does that work with the school?
That's a really good question. I need to figure out, like I said before, how to help fold both the student media operations into the wider curriculum. At the moment, no, they don't. And that's one reason why I think a class is absolutely necessary, because that would help incentivize people. You'd get class credit, and then you'd also participate in this newspaper. And I'd also want to keep it open to non-JMS students. So I haven't figured out how to do that bureaucratically just yet at the moment. But what I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks doing, Josh, is going into classrooms, a lot of the journalism classrooms. I'm going to probably try to target the labs themselves. I'm going to target the public affairs reporting class, because I think that that's probably a good space to find people who want to do more news. But the other piece of advice I got from somebody the other day that was really interesting was also consider non-JMS courses. There may be people who are taking, say, political science courses who might be open to writing for the Daily Aztec, but haven't really thought about it, haven't been approached about it. Maybe in some of the other fine arts classes, there are people who are really good at photography, but hadn't thought about participating in the Daily Aztec. So at the moment, there's not a lot of, there's no formal structure to my knowledge. There's no like class credit per se. And so I have to think through the ways to just partner and collaborate more with the faculty, but the wider faculty at large.
Yeah, the other thing that just came to mind as you mentioned that is just there are a lot of people a lot of students, high school students, junior high students, and with their phones, they are creating content on a regular basis, whether they put it on Instagram or whether they put it on TikTok or whether they put it on something else that I'm too old to understand. So you have a whole lot of creativity that is already taking place. And not all journalism needs to be hardcore reporting. We need that. I feel like that's important. But I think that there's a lot of just really fun slice of life day on campus stories that can be and should be created, whether it's writing about it, whether it's putting together quick little videos. And so I'm curious, again, at the very beginning stages of your job, how much this can be and maybe that whether that's a way to entice people to come work.
Yeah, so that's a really great point, and I hope during the course of this conversation I haven't downplayed any of the other aspects or any of the other types of coverage and reporting, because I think the Daily Aztec does do really good sports reporting at the moment. I think they do really good arts and culture and lifestyle coverage at the moment. I just want the students to think more longer term about how to, within that framework, still provide news and do less of the, hey, here's an interesting thing that took place on campus. I want to emphasize in the minds of the reporters and the editors why this matters and why it should matter to other people. And so refocusing the news side is only one part of what I'm doing, but also working with, say, the sports and the arts and culture people to start thinking about their coverage as news unto itself is important. I think that's actually paramount to growing the readership and giving people a reason to pick it up and to read it or to tune in over the long term, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jesse. Well, I admit when I first heard that what was going to happen, my heart sank. And then I started to think about it more objectively. And I thought, look, this isn't the 90s anymore. This isn't even 2019 before COVID anymore. And so when you said earlier in this podcast about how the institutional knowledge that gets passed down, that struck a chord with me, because I learned from the people who were just a year or two older than me. They taught me, and then I taught those who came after me. And when you lose that struck a chord to me about how this is necessary. And so I'm really excited to hear these things. I think it's a pivotal time for San Diego State, for student journalism. And I'm glad that you're there. I like what you've had to say. And so I am heavily rooting for you and have a vested interest in you and everybody else with both the Daily Aztec and KCR.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say, Josh, that I heard from some of the students that there was some apprehension about me walking in the door, and they felt like they had no say in the wider administrative transition from AS to JMS, and they're not wrong at all. And so I think my immediate task is to build trust, and the only way I'm ever going to do that is to prove that I'm acting in good faith, to prove that I'm frankly not a stooge, to prove that I know what I'm talking about, and more importantly, just listen and to respond to what they need themselves. And I think that JMS is being genuine and sincere when they say, we want this to produce at the highest possible level, and we want it to be rewarding and fulfilling, and we want to grow it, and we want more people to participate, because that benefits JMS as well. That's good for them, that's good for the students, that's good for everybody. So I'm just here to try to alleviate some fears.
Okay, Jesse, I know that I already asked you this question once, but I want to ask you this question again because I think it's really important. That is, if alums want to get involved some way, some fashion, what can they do? And don't forget to tell us how they can get in touch with you.
If alums want to get involved, I'd say tune in, read the paper online if you're not already. The Daily Aztec has a newsletter, so please sign up for that. Track its progress for yourself. But more importantly, reach out to me directly if you want to buy an ad or donate. We need both sources of revenue to stay afloat and to thrive long term. I would love for the Daily Aztec and KCR to coexist alongside the other major media outlets in San Diego County, but the truth is we can't get there without your support. So you can email me at jmmarks at sdsu.edu. That's JMMARX at sdsu.edu. Or you can try me at my desk number. That's 619-594-7807. Or just reach out and say hello. I'm still thinking through the best steps, and I'm always happy to talk ideas with people who take this stuff seriously and with the urgency that it deserves.
All right, Jesse, once again, welcome to San Diego State University, and thanks for sharing all the knowledge about all the changes that are going on.
Thanks so much, Josh. I appreciate you, and I appreciate letting me talk about this.
That is Jesse Marx. He is the new JMS Student Media Manager. My name is Josh Suchon. Again, we are just beginning the fall 2024 semester. We will have new editions of this podcast every week. And at the end of the semester, I like to visit with the editor-in-chief or the general manager of the Daily Aztec and KCR. And so we will continue to follow the story of how this goes along throughout the course of this semester as well. Thanks for listening. This is the Where You At podcast, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms, in person, or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.